Learn the 7-step Pennystocking Framework from the one and only Timothy Sykes. Tim Sykes is a penny stock trader and teacher who became a self-made millionaire by the age of 22. He's been featured in a variety of media outlets including CNN, Larry King, Steve Harvey, Forbes, Men's Journal, and more. The 7-step Pennystocking Framework, Key Takeaways. What you can learn today about bubble market psychology, observed for hundreds of years, and predictable price action. The original 7-step framework was based on a decade of observation. See how it still plays out a decade later. Learn the 7 steps by studying the charts in this post. Plus, 5 tips for trading the Pennystocking Framework. And a bonus top tip every trader should know. The Pennystocking Framework is an overarching pattern. You could think of it as a pattern of patterns. It's not an exact science, but once you understand what's happening, you'll see it again and again. Learn the framework, but don't just memorize the patterns. Try to understand the rationale behind them. That way you can adapt to shifting markets. And the key to long-term success is adapting. This video covers the basics of the 7-step Pennystocking Framework. I've included charts with several variations. Notice that in some of the charts, numbers repeat. Or, if the overall pattern hasn't played out, numbers might be missing. It's not an exact science, so focus on the similarities. Let's do this. Step number 1, the pre-pump or promotion. At step number 1, you can make big gains, but it takes time. The goal is to predict the huge spike ahead of time, regardless of the reason. This step is best for patient people with small accounts. That said, it's difficult to guess on plays like this. It's tough without experience. Especially since the old-school email and mailer promotions pretty much died. Jack Kellogg played the number 1 with marijuana stocks in early 2021. He witnessed the sector run in 2017 and 2018. His thesis was that if Biden won the election, weed stocks would spike. In early January, he bought a group of weed stocks. Then, he waited. Jack has spent years studying the 7-step Pennystocking Framework. He's arguably the best student of the framework I've ever had. He crushed it in February after holding some of the stocks for nearly a month. Keep reading for a review of one of Jack's trades. Step number 2, ramp. In step number 2, the run-up speeds up. There's consolidation in anticipation of a breakout. Ideally, there's sideways action and then a technical breakout. There's often increased volume and more hype. Back in the day, the hype came on message boards and emails. These days, it's done by Twitter pumps and in chat rooms. Tip: promoters use dozens, if not hundreds, of bot accounts on social media. Ride the hype, but don't believe the BS. You've been warned. When a stock is ramping, it's possible to buy and hold for a few days or weeks. But again, you're basically guessing that the promotion will work. Step number 3, Supernova. This is how I made my first $1 million back in 1999 and 2000. And to be honest, I didn't understand what was happening. I just recognized the pattern and rode the wave. I bought the breakouts. This is the most rewarding time to be long. But it's also the riskiest. You must be aware that the higher a supernova goes, the more overextended it gets. Be very cautious with buying overextended stocks. It all comes down to experience and practice. When you're wrong, and you will be sometimes, always follow rule number 1, cut losses quickly. How long do you hold a supernova? That depends on a lot of things. Is the big move happening in one day? Or is it over multiple days? How many days has the stock been green? you have to consider many factors. I recommend learning the first green day pattern. But also learn to use the 7 indicators of the Sykes sliding scale. And be willing to adapt. Remember, supernovas can flip on a dime. Step number 4, cliff dive. You know the old adage? What goes up must come down. The 7-step Pennystocking framework came from observing price action on penny stock pumps. Back in the day, once a promotion stopped, the bottom fell out. Stocks sometimes dropped 50% or more in a day. Fast forward to today. Stock promoters might not use the same tools, but they still pump stocks. And when the promotion stops, the bottom still falls out. A small decline near the top turns into a full-on collapse. This is the best time to short sell promotions. But it's also usually the most difficult time to find shares to short. Why? When a stock goes from 50 cents to $5 over a few days, short sellers start circling like vultures. Especially if it's based on promotion and hype. We've seen many sub-penny plays go full supernova recently. So they might get up to 10, 20, or even 50 cents a share. So before we get to step number 5, there are 2 major caveats. First, I think shorting is a flawed strategy right now. There are too many over-aggressive newbie shorts in the market. It's a risky strategy in a crowded space. Second, I'd never short an ultra-low-priced play. Even when I was short-biased, I rarely shorted anything below $1. There had to be a good reason and/or proof of a pump. But that's okay because I've learned to adapt by playing. Step number 5, dip buy. The panic dip buy is my favorite pattern for small accounts. For me, this is the best time to buy a promoted stock. There's still momentum and interest. The promoters tell their followers to hold, but a lot of newbies set hard stop-loss orders. When the stop-losses get taken out, it becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy. Often there's a solid bounce for one or more of these reasons, depending on the stock's price. Dip buyers are waiting for the turn. Short sellers buy to cover. Again, no big-time short seller is gonna short sub-penny stocks. Most won't touch anything below 50 cents a share. The risk is too high. Promoters try to create a soft landing so they don't get investigated. A stock can run 50% or more in a few hours or days. Sometimes the bounce happens in under an hour. That means preparation is key. How should you prepare? Learn to read level 2 and use technical analysis. Tip: reading level 2 on listed stocks isn't as straightforward as OTCs. With listed stocks, it's more about technical analysis and reading the chart. Again, sometimes the panic bounces, and sometimes it doesn't. Don't get stubborn. When in doubt, follow rule number 1 and get out. Be aware that the market ebbs and flows. Sometimes bounces work well. Other times, there are fake-outs and outright failures. Learn to avoid these 3 common mistakes when dip buying too early. Remember, you must adapt. Step number 6, the dead pump bounce. When I was short-biased, this was my favorite time to short. Again, when a stock goes supernova, short sellers want to short it. But that's risky because you have no idea how high it can go. Once the stock has had a cliff dive and a bounce, short selling can be a little more predictable. That said, there's not as much range. So while it's easier to find shares to short, you're not as likely to get a big percent win. Also, we've seen plays with 2 or more big spikes recently. Sometimes the bounces go right back to highs. Sometimes there's no bounce at all. Bounce or not, the next step is. Step number 7, the long kiss goodnight. Penny stock pumps don't end with the company changing the world with its amazing product. They're all junk. And that's why step number 7 happens. It's a gradual decline over days, weeks, or months. Look at this chart. OPTI bounced several times. Like a bouncing ball, it eventually lost momentum. Top tips for the 7-step penny stocking framework. Hopefully, you see the similarities and understand the numbers on the charts above. Study these charts. Again, it's not an exact science. The overall pattern has variations, but the outcome is the same. So what can you do to better prepare for the opportunities as they play out? Tip number 1, watch and react. You don't know if there are greater odds of bouncing or failing. All you can do is watch and react. Never guess. When in doubt, get out. Tip number 2, former runners can run again. Be aware of former runners. Once a stock runs once, it can run again with the right news and volume. The ENZC and HMBL charts above are good examples. Some stocks have a number 3 and number 4, only to spike even higher for another number 3. The LTNC chart above is a good example. Tip number 3, beware of bag holders. A company that has been around a while and has gone supernova has bag holders. These traders believed the hype, bought at a stupidly high price, and refused to cut losses. They'll try to sell into any big spike just to recover losses. So be aware that former supernovas rarely go as high the next time around. Tip number 4, understand basic technical analysis. Every time a stock breaks a new low or high, it shows up on some trader's screen. It doesn't matter if it's daily, monthly, or yearly. Traders scan for highs and lows. Be aware of the highs and lows in multiple time frames. Tip number 5, the 7-step penny stocking framework happens in multiple time frames. As strange as it sounds, the penny stocking framework can play out in a day. Check it out. The VDRM chart here skips the number 1 and doesn't spend much time at number 2. It was pretty much a number 3 right out of the gate. After that, the framework plays out pretty accurately. Do you see the cliff dive, the dip buys, the dead pump bounces, and the long slow kiss goodnight? Watch for these patterns as part of the overall pattern. Look for them every day. Especially on big percent gainers. Top tip, understand bubble psychology. I saved this for last because it might just be the most important concept for any penny stock trader. The 7-step penny stocking framework is an example of a bubble. Even if it's for a single stock, the psychology matches that of a bubble. So it's key to understand how bubbles work. I encourage every student to read Extraordinary Popular Delusions and the Madness of Crowds. Even though it's 180 years old, it's still relevant. Check out this chart showing the stages of a bubble as applied to a penny stock supernova. The stock in this chart doesn't matter. I could have chosen any one of dozens of stocks that follow the 7-step framework or variations in the past 2 years. The point is to understand the psychology behind the different stages in a bubble. Then learn to apply that to trading the 7-step framework. It's all about hype, manipulation, greed, and fear. Notice the different parts of the mania or number 3 supernova stage. Learn them inside and out. And note that media attention means social media, too. That's when social pumps are often at their highest. Some promoters tweet 75 to 100 times per day about a stock.